Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Yao Du. I'm a fourth-year Ph.D. candidate at the UC Irvine Informatics department. Actually, I just defended last week, so I officially earned my degree here at UCI. This is my dissertation research supervised by Professor Katie Sillen-Tickenbush, which she kindly allowed me to present this directly myself. And this time I'm working with Regine de Guzman on the Surf IoT project. So the title of my talk is Designing Accessible Voice User Interfaces for Children via Amazon Alexa Games. So to give you a little bit background about the motivation for why I work on this particular research using voice assistants, since the initial release of Apple Siri in 2011, voice assistants such as Amazon Alexa, Apple Siri, and many other technologies on the market were rapidly adopted by more than 30 million US families. And the adoption rate is projected to reach more than 55% US homes by 2022. So with this rapid adoption, many children have also transitioned from using touchscreen interfaces like mobile devices at home to directly communicating with voice assistants. And I will, in this talk, specifically go over some of my motivation for the study and prior literature I draw to inspire my design and development. And I will also share some preliminary findings from the phase 1 analyses of the usability study I conducted, and also share some of the lessons I'm learning and the future work, if any of you are potentially interested in learning more about the research space. So, just by a show of hand, does any of you actually own the voice assistants or smart home speaker at home? Or you can use the thumb up or thumb down icon. Or, okay, I see like at least 6 people out of the whole audience. So that's a good portion, like 1/3 of the individuals. Just do me another favor in the chat. Can you text which smart home speaker you own? Like, do you own Alexa? Do you own Google? Or I'm assuming if you have the iPhone, all of you have the Siri, but not everyone actually adopt the use of Siri for voice-based assistance and scheduling or different other purposes. So thank you so much for doing that. So for those of you who just never interacted with assistants, let me take Amazon Alexa as an example. So if you have interacted with Alexa command, you know that to wake up these conversational or voice assistants, you can call their name and then you ask a follow-up question or a command. Some of the things Alexa understand could be telling you the weather or turn on light, like smart home automation, or ordering toilet paper, which is probably a popular command over the past few months. Differently, an Alexa skill is so specific voice application, very similar to like an app on the iPhone or Android phone on the App Store. And these voice applications are mostly developed by third-party developers and allowing users to request more extended conversation engagement. In this case, it will be playing games. Here I had listed some of the example games you can play via Alexa. It included some conventional games like 20 questions, Would You Rather, as well as some innovative voice audio games that you can play by just speaking to the speaker. If you actually do have Alexa, I didn't get to see the chat, but if you do have Alexa or Google, which they call these Google Actions, and you have actually played games with these voice assistants, can you also use the chat feature and then just comment some of the games you're playing, or maybe if you don't play games, just feel free to use the chat to share your utility with these voice assistants. Okay, so moving on. And what other motivations inspired my research is that my previous career is a licensed speech language pathologist. So I work with children with disabilities who needs help with their speech, language, and overall communication. As some of you may recall from last week, Dr. Liz Pena's presentation, she is one of my committee member, and we use a lot of different assessments, intervention tools, and technology to help children to improve their communication. And once the voice technology becomes widely adopted by a lot of children, I noticed there are existing reports of like anecdotal stories from parents as well as clinicians about parents commenting how Siri has changed their children's life because it allows a direct conversation between their children and a conversational artificial intelligence. And some other ideas here are also from the clinicians who actually work with children with disability using these smart home technology. So as the picture you see here, there are great activities that are being used and implemented by therapists in their clinical sessions. And I was just fascinated about reading these stories, and it gave me new ideas about how technology can push the boundary between like a general consumer life and home automation, some of the wider applications we know, scheduling, reminder, timer, play music. This just fascinated me, and inspired me to understand what additional affordances are available via these voice applications, and what can I do as a therapist and also a designer researcher at UC Irvine to create application to healthy children who have disabilities. So just to share one really interesting quote from the speech therapist who wrote a blog about how Alexa changed my SLP life. She says, the skill called Magic Door also has a therapy application. It tells stories and let listeners choose what happens next. I also love the 20 questions and the Would You Rather Family Edition for working on carryovers of articulation and fluency skills. New fun is always being added to Alexa. So for me, I do have several Alexa devices at home, even prior to doing research on Alexa. I follow a lot of their Alexa newsletter sent via email to learn about different applications. So if any of you also do similar things, like you like to either go on App Store or you like to just play around and mess up with these technology, feel free to leave any comments or chat on how you use these, because I'm always interested in learning about everyone's usage of these emerging technology. One thing I do want to comment is that Alexa as a voice game design platform, I chose it because there are just so many different technology players out there. As you can see in the past 9 years or like almost a decade, almost all the major tech companies have released their own version of the smart home assistant or speaker or the different interfaces, so you can use conversational assistant via desktop, mobile, and web interfaces. And out of all these fascinating platforms, I decided to choose Amazon Alexa for multiple reasons for this project. So first, Amazon is one of the earliest companies to commercialize a child version smart speaker to specifically target children as consumers. So there are stories, there are games, and there are multimedia activities that are just specific for children on a dedicated child version Alexa smart home speaker. Another reason why I chose this is because the Alexa skill store has hundreds and thousands of voice applications. It's one of the biggest one among all of them. So this also allowed me to look at what existing applications already being designed, and learning from that process can inspire our own design processes. So working with my professor, we're at this Made with Play lab, and I was inspired to look at this granular research question. What kinds of communication and play-based interaction can I design for children through these Alexa games? And that really inspired the remaining part of my research, which I always like to start with literature review. Currently, I'm working with Regine and a couple other students at my lab. We read research articles in several different areas. the three major body of literatures I drew my inspiration from are from the human-computer interaction and communication science and disorders, which is a field of study a lot of speech therapists are trained to learn and provide clinical services. And the third domain that's interesting here at UC Irvine is we also have a really great team of researchers who design games, and this intersects with the human-computer interaction facets. And all of these three bodies of literature, we see different gaps, and that's the research process of identifying gaps in research and then try to come up with solutions. So one of the gaps I learned about why children are particularly challenged in using voice assistants is related to their automatic speech recognition and natural language understanding. A lot of these conversational models are built upon adult speech and typically native English speakers. So children who are developing their communication skills have a lot of usability issues and breakdowns when they're trying to use them. Another opportunity space is that we know many individuals who have visual, motor, or cognitive impairments are already capitalizing on these voice-only interfaces. And the children with autism and speech impairments are also increasingly using these conversational agents. And this allowed voice assistant to become this potential assistive and educational technology tool. But currently, we don't really know a lot of, we don't have a lot of design guidelines on how to design this accessible experience so this individual with disability are supported rather than hindered in their user experience. And the two other body of literature I draw from child language development, we learned that children develop this ability to communicate and also repair their breakdowns in communication at a very young age. As 2 or 3 years old, many of you probably have interacted with younger sibling or cousin or other children, and you know that they're trying to communicate and they do a lot of activities to engage in communication. And how you communicate as a communication partner with these children and what type of activities you're engaging with them can really influence the quality of communication. And how does this relate to our design of voice assistants and voice games is that we know a lot about human-to-human communication, but once you design this using artificial intelligence, we don't have a lot of good body of literature talking about intersection between the human and the child, specifically child and the computer interaction. And connecting these two bodies of literature back to game design, I found this fascinating because we know that, children grow up, like all of us probably grew up speaking or interacting with some of these verbal games like I Spy, Someone Says, and Peekaboo. And that's how we learn basic social communication from these verbal games with parents or peers. And we also know other genres of game design are so instrumental, like audio game designs have been used by blind users who can't play with a video game or mobile game on their devices. And also we know that there are different types of games like trivia game where you do like, here's a question, you answer the question, here's another question, you answer a question. The dialogue itself is very similar to how a conversational assistant is communicating with a human. So I drew a lot of inspiration from these body of literature and games. And I noticed there's also a gap in this area, which not many research have focused on children's games with voice assistants. So kind of putting these all together, my research team designed our game based on previous language assessments, as well as evaluation of existing Alexa skills. And the team worked together in a very collaborative, interdisciplinary manner. So I had clinicians who are trained speech therapists working with our designer and developers. And the way they collaborate is to look at different facets of the game design. And then we also have undergraduate students as analysts to collaboratively work with clinicians for data collection with children and get information from playtesting. And we bring this back to the designer and developer to improve upon the game and make a better version to go through different game design and development iteration. So we decided to design the game using our Amazon Sound library, and the development is completed via Amazon Alexa Skill Kit, so which is what Virginia is currently working on for this project during the summer. Just to show you a quick demo, about the game itself. I'm gonna play a short clip about my sister trying interacting with the game we developed called Animal Actions.
Alexa, open Animal Actions.
Welcome to Animal Actions. There are some animals trapped in a dark room. Can you help me to save them? Please use your loudest voice and say yes or no.
Yes.
Awesome. Dun dun dun. Let's start. Listen, one animal made a sound. What is this animal?
Cat.
Bang! You are a rock star. A cat makes that sound. Another animal is calling for help. What is it?
Dog.
Okay, so for the interest of time, I'm gonna leave it here. And we designed this game to target children between 3 to 6-year-old because by then they should have basic speech and language skill to listen and answer questions and also carry short conversation in the way how my sister is interacting. And we had 2 levels of the games. One level, level 1 is easier. It's just guessing animal items, as you saw. Level 2, animals are starting to move about and then doing different activities. And children were elicited different single and multi-word responses. So the second level is a little bit more difficult than the first level. And to evaluate the game and its utility with children, I came up with 4 research questions. This includes to understand how parents and children are already using voice assistants at home for daily activities and whether games are even being used and adopted. And the second research question is related to the play testing. So when interacting with animal actions, what type of verbal responses and errors do children produce? And what specific linguistic and technical difficulties do they experience? And how do they solve those issues? And lastly, what design and social technical considerations can we learn from the playtesting and the question, the parent-child interaction at home to improve their overall user experience for the Alexa voice games? So I'm going to summarize because this is a little complex of like an entire dissertation study, but we collected parent questionnaire data as well as children's gameplay video to answer these 4 constructs of research questions. And the user evaluation study happened with 18 parents and children. We collected data in the participants' home. Unfortunately, all of these happened before the COVID. So the data we collected from children are videos for their gameplay, and data collected from parents are their questionnaires. And here's a little picture of the setup of study where we recorded the child and also, recorded the child by asking them to speak to the Alexa via mobile phone and analyze the video with 2 trained coders to evaluate different interaction during the gameplay. So just to give you some quick results from our evaluation study, you might be interested in learning. So we learned that from parents' report, most parents don't really use voice assistants for games yet. Some of the common activities are actually very similar to previous research of reports indicating the parents use them for timer, music, and question and information. Even though they don't really use voice games, they express interest. They want to learn more about educational literacy related activities. And children are experiencing difficulties from like automatic speech recognition, natural language understanding. And what they did to mitigate that is they learn what parents are doing and teaching them in terms of like strategies or tips to speak better to these voice assistants. And some of the quotes to share with you. One of the participant moms says, children learn to give instructions to the voice assistants from our parents. And because there's no password, they can just talk to them whenever they want to. However, some of the children do have trouble saying even like calling Alexa because it's a very difficult hard word to pronounce. So they need to stop and say these words calmly and slowly so they can even start using some of these commands. And then to give you a quick idea about how we analyze children's videos, we broke down the research question into analytical categories, and all their children's interaction behaviors with Alexa. For instance, if they pronounce the sound wrong, like Alexa, they said it wrong, it's articulation error from the children. And for the Alexa side, when Alexa couldn't recognize children's speech, that's a speech recognition error, or sometimes children speak words or sentences that are not registered by Alexa, that's an unknown error. And in response to Alexa's technical breakdowns, children can use different repair strategies like repeating themselves or say it more clearly. Given the interest of time, I'm only going to show you one example of the boy who was playing, and he actually didn't make a lot of mistakes. You can see the interaction by following the transcript here, but this tells us that the game itself has difficulties really analyzing, extracting, parsing the speech for complex utterances from children, which is a big problem with most of these voice assistants in terms of understanding human speech.
This animal likes to howl at the moon. What is it?
Oh, a wolf. A wolf. A wolf.
Excellent. You are so good at this. A wolf makes that sound. This animal decides to follow you. You took the animal to your home. Now, both of you are at the front door. What is the animal doing?
Mama, that werewolf was ringing at the doorbell.
Listen carefully. The animal is trying to ask people to open doors for him. What is he doing?
He can't open the door for that wolf. Wolf, open the door for the
Listen
wolf.
carefully. The animal is trying to ask people to open doors for him. What is he doing?
Ring the doorbell.
So as you can see here, the child actually used repetition, and his first response is ring our doorbell, which is not actually something we put as the correct answer for Alexa. And he was really immersed in the game and almost like our doorbell rang. And so he actually called mom to like make a comment, and then ask both mom and Alexa to, open the door. So all of these are not recognized and also parsed correctly by Alexa, because this is very unexpected type of interaction where he just demonstrated great immersive experience and engagement, even though it took him several turns to get to the correct answer response. This demonstration of the video interaction taught me that, when I'm designing this trivia game, that children are expected to say the right answer in order to move on with the game. It is very challenging that to some extent, this interaction potentially have hindered children's participation engagement because all these great interaction is judged as incorrect or wrong. So just quick summary of some of the lessons I learned about designing. I learned that the audio design and voice interface design are both instrumental, especially when we think about designing for children as our users. They're developing their communication skills, their vocabulary knowledge, and they're also their overall experience with these gameplay are very entrenched into the interaction or conversational supports we're creating for the children. So all in relationship to tying this back to game design, I just really found that children benefit from the simple to complex progression. It's pretty universal designing all types of applications for children. You want to make it simple and easy to start, but then use the level design to support their challenge and the gameplay goal, so they kind of like feel motivated. They want to achieve more and perform better by solving the challenges during the gameplay. And in this particular game, you saw that we also had like a little story narrative flow in the background and different verbal praises, encouragement. All of these are important considerations when we think about game design using the voice interface. And I'd like to wrap up by sharing some of the future work which is currently happening. Right now, in the summer, we're designing the voice interface with additional picture aids. Thank you so much to the previous support from Europe. We were able to work with a visual designer, helping us make accessible design by adding the audio and the visual experience for this game. And I'm also collaborating with researchers at Chapman. We're testing different ideas about how individuals who are completely nonverbal that rely on these speech generating devices and picture icons, how can they play the game with Alexa via synthesized speech? That's something that no prior research have examined, and it's machine communicating to machine. So that's something super interesting we're looking at. And lastly, we're doing evaluation of existing Alexa voice games and try to see which applications are on the App Store that are already educational. And a lot of families have expressed interest in learning more about this technology and the educational value. And me, myself, I'm very interested in learning about utility of these applications for teletherapy, as many children are really during the COVID-19 period are learning and receiving services remotely. So tying this back into service delivery, the potential is really unlimited. And that's everything about my talk. I want to just do a big shout out to all my students, including those who are still working with me for the next academic year, and the financial supports from all these individual entities and research units. That's everything about my presentation. Thank you so much.
This is wonderful, wonderful. This is the opportunity to ask questions. Who would like to go first?
I actually had a question. You brought up how like Alexa couldn't pick up on like certain like phrases the kid would say because it wasn't marked correct. Did you guys ever account for, since they are younger, like accents? Because I know sometimes Alexa doesn't pick up on certain accents when people are working like learning a second language. Did you guys ever like account for that, or is that like not tested?
That's a really great question. We actually collected background questionnaires from children. We have more than, I think actually about 60% of children actually have exposure to a second language. But because most of them are born and raised here in the United States, English is their primary language. We also did intentionally select children who have more than 50% use of English. So English is considered more dominant language. And also because they're just learning speech and language, accents, typically you pick them up after influence of another language at a very high level. That's how the speech sound production patterns and a lot of like super fragmental carried over to additional second language. So it doesn't really happen here in our case, but I'm a second language learner, so my primary language is Mandarin. And when I talk to Alexa, there are certain sounds I have to over enunciate to make sure Alexa understand me. I don't know, like any of you who commented, I see like Shelly, like Anat or Judith or Jonathan. I don't know if any of you ran into issues with just even communicating with being a second language speaker, and this Alexa ran into any issues. But myself and my developers who don't grow up speaking English as native English speaker, we all had a little issue with speech recognition.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I'm also like a second language like speaker, and I know a lot of like the kids that are like growing up right now, and they're like in that age group that you tested. A lot of them have accents, and so whenever they're trying to like do Siri or something, they have to like constantly repeat themselves because it's not picking up like certain words.
It's very interesting to learn. I anticipated that it didn't happen with my case, but it's very hard because our judgment for accent is very subjective. So I love to follow up with you just to learn more about your experience using those. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And I was going to add, I'm a native speaker, and there are times that she does not understand me.
So just to follow up to that, is the software being enhanced over time where it becomes more intelligent to capture different iterations?
So that's the benefit of having the model, the machine learning model. So like I like to say this to some of my students: if the software is free, you're the training data. So a lot of us bought these devices at a pretty cheap price, and then we use it for a lot of different activities. And the more we speak to it, the algorithm picks up on our data and they capitalize upon it. So as so the more usage data, the better it's gonna get. That's why children's data are difficult, because not many children are actually able to even successfully use it. And it does not get better from adequate training data. And sometimes, like imagine in my case, mom had to help the child say that command, and it's not getting data from children directly. So I think that's why I suspect like Amazon released a child version where like this is just for children, and they can have like a big body of children's speech corpus data, and they can capitalize on training that. But don't quote me. I know this is recorded. But that's probably something some of these tech companies are realizing, is like they need to make their products specifically tailored to children in order to get better with their algorithms. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Miriam, that's a great question. What do the rest of you think? Melinda, how is your microphone working today?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yay!
awesome. Yay, it works. Okay, I do have a question, and I think it's more not for your current work, but for in the future. I was curious if you ever are thinking about expanding this to other voice assistants, and if so, would there be any differences you would need to make to the model to expand it to other ones like Google Home?
It really depends on like where we're building this. So after I started developing this Alexa and almost completed the game, I learned that there are third-party tools you can build in their development platform, but then export it to like both Google and Alexa. I would love to create activities that really reduce technology barriers, because we don't want children to actually have to be like brand loyal. You may, especially this is a research project. We're trying to investigate some research questions. I myself, I'm technology agnostic, so I'm not sticking with any platforms. And I'm not getting sponsorship from different tech companies to compare this. But the current adoption is Google is catching up. If any of you are aware, even though Amazon released the smart home speaker way earlier, I think the rationale behind some of my colleagues are developing for children using Google. And there are pros and cons for both platforms. I think Amazon has like a larger ecosystem of existing applications, but Google has just better like language, computational linguistics data and supports. They're also like better on multilingual supports, because they already have those Google Translator. They have a lot of data, like everything you're using on emails and then those hints and prompts, they're really good at capitalizing on some of these user-generated content. So I think the future is going to be very exciting. As you call in my previous slide, they're just all different players on the market now, and this is gonna be the next next decade. If you look forward, is gonna be the next year. The next decade of like, there's an app for this. We're gonna say there's like assistant to do this for every single one of us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, what did this presentation generate in you? Curiosity, a question, a comment you would like to make? Vikram, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of a question as well. It's more about like for future stuff as well. Are there any like, do you plan on going into like multiple languages, as in like more than just games dedicated solely for English, so for whatever other languages using like Alexa or Google Home?
Yeah, I don't have the plan right now, but I learned that I don't know about the other conversation agent, but since there are different versions of voice assistants in Mandarin already, and they have a big market in China about different conversational assistants. There's a similar version of the Google, a similar version of like Alexa, and it's different language, different interaction, and then the design and affordances of those, like the target users and the existing voice applications on those platforms are also a lot more different than the English version. I would love to collaborate with someone who are working voice assistants with different language options, because I think this is kind of like the future. Because think about many parts in the world where we have people who are still illiterate, maybe, or older people who like lose their visual like vision, and they're experiencing visual and motor impairments, and they prefer communicate in something rather than English. And voice assistants can become a quality of life support to help them with a lot of these, not just learning, but all the other activities in life. And that will be probably the next 10 years of my research trajectory down the road. It will be a lot of collaboration with different stakeholders. Yeah.
Yao, speaking of trajectory, and if you're comfortable, we would like to hear your career projection so far, and share with us a little bit, what does it mean to be in a PhD program? What are your goals in the future? What are some of the challenges, successes, and failures that you might have experienced?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for allowing me to share. I personally really started off thinking about designing assistive technology when I was applying for the UC Irvine, program. Later, I learned that I grew up as a gamer myself, so I play some of the computer games in my middle school, and I was one of the more addicted person. So I know game is fascinating, and I learned a lot about like mythology and history from like playing some of the older games, which I'm not gonna date myself. And I know game has fascinating value to teach you, teach new knowledge just through play-based experiences. And sometimes we look at the potential hindrance of like game, the detrimental effects of games. And I'm trying to really bridge this gap of like, my role is to design educational assistive technology, and there are opportunities in game design. So in my earlier years as PhD student was a lot of challenges positioning. So it took several years to put those three like circles back and then say, hey, that's where I am designing and doing research. And also another thing I really learned is collaborating with different disciplines, because we all speak different languages. Like my student, Regine, is a great developer, and I can't write those lines of code, but because I was able to design like architecture with my students and also work with clinicians to bring everyone together, it's almost like it expedited a lot of the research progress, but you gotta learn to find the right research partnership. So that's another thing I'm learning. And I think opportunities like Europe or the Surf IoT, where you get to see these potential research projects, like some of these exciting things in health informatics aspect, like I just want to throw names I want to thank for, like Professor Kai Zhang, also like introduced me to some of his project classes where I got to mentor undergraduate students since like my second year of my PhD career. And then just working with these students really taught me a lot and make me feel like my research journey, I'm not lonely, I'm not fighting myself. Like my students are learning with me together. And I'm learning these new things along with my advisor, who also is really interested in learning about voice games, because this is all new to all of us. Yeah, so I think learning community is the best way for you to build a like long-term trajectory. And it starts with undergrad years. And I was one of the undergrads at UCSD who was working on it, like independent study 199. So that's how I started doing research as an undergrad. And it taught me that research can be interesting as long as you find the right project you're interested and you want to come back to it someday, even though you know, I work in industry and I'm trying to figure out things, but knowing that that's the problem you're just so motivated to solve, and you're happy to lose sleep on it some days, and then just learning that this can potentially either make an impact to some children's life or just having a clear goal, and take small baby steps towards it. Those are all like, yeah, this is just pretty much my journey over the past 10 years. Yeah.
These are beautiful and powerful statements. I could see Judith is thinking. So Judith, what's your reaction to what you heard?
I think it was really interesting learning how different languages can affect kind of the speech recognition in it. And then especially, I would like to see the future work with speech and language disorders, especially now with like the COVID pandemic. I see like I was going to start working with autistic kids and kind of like offering teletherapy, but then it's kind of like a challenge too, trying to figure out like, okay, well, how are we going to deliver these things, or like how are you going to understand the child? But if you're kind of giving the game where they're both interested and engaging with, where they see that they're having fun rather than doing actual work, it seems kind of like very interesting work.
That's beautiful. Again,
Yeah.
it's these reactions that we want to turn them into actions. And then for you to get into this proactive mode and reach out and connect and seek advice. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in what you said. And it's all about reaching out to other disciplines and seeking their input and advice. Jonathan, what do you think?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. About the presentation itself, and
Or anything you heard that something triggered inside it.
yeah.
You know?
So earlier you were mentioning that sometimes kids don't have too much success using the voice assistants, whether it's because of like an accent that they have maybe, or just inability to pronounce words. Has there been any cases so far where children get frustrated enough with being stuck in the game just to lose interest in it? Like, is that accounted for?
Yes, I actually had examples about those where the child is trying to make sure Alexa understands him. And those are the moments where we analyze those as communication breakdowns and Alexa technical breakdowns. It happened multiple times across every single play testing. And what's interesting is one thing I also shared in my defense talk last week was Alexa will stop. I don't know about Google actually, but Alexa will stop listening to you after 2 rounds of like asking you questions but not getting a response, because it assumes you're gone or you left because it can't see. That's been challenging because many children were just thinking the right answer and Alexa just assumed they don't know or they don't respond. So that's the biggest frustration is maintaining the active conversation flow. Like, just put into perspective, even on Zoom, sometimes when someone asks a question and then everyone is silent, that's kind of like awkward. We don't know if that's the right question or are you like getting it? And then if any of you notice, some people will jump up into that Zoom like question and go like, I'll answer or I'll say something. That's kind of like how I'm seeing with communication breakdowns and frustration, is we adults know so many tactics to how to repair those. Children are developing those, and they're experiencing a lot of those difficulties during games too, even though I intentionally designed to account for those.
I see.
And as I could see, you have some deep thought you want to share with us. I can feel it.
I did have one question. I was wondering, like, so your research is mostly based on like younger children. I'm wondering if like this could be applied once the software is a bit more advanced with different accents. I'm wondering if this could be applied to like older children who are like learning English for the first time. Because like I know there's like special classes, like ESL classes. I'm wondering if this could be helpful in that kind of environment.
Yeah, there's some research out there already using voice assistants for second language learning. Researchers are working on this because it's just a very naturalistic way to give how to say, you know, like when I learned English, it was very drill driven and reading from textbook, and you don't actually have a native speaker to practice. That would be super luxury. My parents had to pay like a native English speaker for me to like, we go to those classes taught by like a foreigner teacher to get better with English conversation skills. But just me looking at the possibilities with voice assistants, a lot of them are just their conversation interaction is super complex. And if you think about like any children in educational settings, a lot of classroom teachers already bring these into their classrooms because it's just fun and interactive. And a lot of these applications can be made to be super educational. Yeah.
Thank you.
I bet you, as you were sharing words of wisdom, our godfather, Professor G.P. Lee, triggered something in him. And I noticed when he moves in his chair, that means he's anxious to share something with us. So I'm gonna turn it over to him for some concluding remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Saeed. Yeah, thank you for a very interesting talk, and I learned a lot. I have two comments. First is about the multiple language, and there are company already developed the chipset allow you to directly translate different language into English or vice versa. So in that way, they can facilitate the learning for like ESL as an example. So one company actually is in San Diego, right? So they are working with Google and Amazon. And I think it's, I can send you an email, maybe you can contact with them. And the second thing is very intriguing is about the game you plan to develop using voice assistants and to create the display contents, right? How many companies currently are working on that solutions and to have a sort of using a voice recognition system and create a content as a feedback, visual feedback, as a way to promote humans and multi-sensors response to the questions. Are there any game developed in such a fashion yet?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of applications out there already. That's why I'm currently also doing like a exploratory study to look at what is already being designed. I don't know all of those people who left in the chat. Any of you have the visual display version of the Google or Alexa, but it has, you can do visual display of the speaker. So not all products are like speaker only. Some of them has a touchscreen interface. I have a Alexa's, Amazon Spot. So that one you can actually take pictures on it because it has a screen. And other ones you can like watch recipe videos, you can watch like news videos. Voice-based games with visuals, I haven't come across any great ones that just offer great experience, so immersive compared to other mobile games. Just because I think the space is new, but there are several ones are already like pretty user-friendly for children. If any of you are interested, you can, I left my email here in the chat. You can just like drop me a line if you want to learn more about what our team is currently looking at, in addition to what I presented here today. And if you just want to ask like grad school and research or industry navigating your overall career trajectory in general, I'm all about working with students, and I was a student. So don't hesitate to ask me any questions if you want to follow up.